What's up, everybody? So, today I found out we are celebrating Beatles Global Day, where they made an impact on children across the world today, on this day in the 1960s. So, in order to celebrate Global Beatles Day, I'm going to read this little golden book about the Beatles for everybody to enjoy, because it is the summer of Beatles, guys. And I'm looking at my subscriber Sophie Hansel here because on this topic, because she probably also knows this is the summer of Beatles. Get it? The summer of Beatles. It's Beatles summer, y'all. Since today is Global Beatles Day, where they made that television appearance, singing All You Need Is Love, for a great organization to feed the hungry children across the world. And what they did was really good, and my parents remembered it because my parents both grew up in the 60s and 70s, because my mom was in elementary school. Yeah, my mom was in elementary school in her mid-elementary school years, like in 3rd or 4th grade. Yeah, I think my mom was in 3rd or 4th grade. And my dad was in junior high school. So, but they remember the day on June 25th, that the Beatles made that special TV broadcast singing All You Need Is Love and that world hunger stuff that they did. So that's why June 25th is known as Global Beatles Day. So let's get to the story, guys. Wow, so look at this great artwork, guys. The Little Golden Book biography about the Beatles by Judy Katsky, illustrated by Mike Plensky. Yeah. So John, Paul, George, and Ringo were 4 friends from Liverpool who rocked the world as the Beatles. Each year, millions of visitors come to the bustling city in northwest England to learn about the band and see where their music dream began. Yeah, check it out, guys. Global Beatles Day. Perfect to go check it out. All right. John Winston Lennon was born in Liverpool on October 9th, 1940. Hey, Sophie, did you know Johnny's middle name is Winston? His middle name came from England's Prime Minister at the time, Winston Churchill. Ooh. Hey, Sophie, I bet Johnny didn't know about that. Your Johnny Crabhands didn't know about that. When John's parents split up, he went to live with his Aunt Mimi. John spent hours in his room drawing cartoons, writing stories, and playing his guitar. The guitar was a gift from his mother, Julia, who died when he was 17. And you see, that's where he got the song Julia from. He dedicated that song to his mother, that Beatles hit called Julia. Oh yeah, and here's Polly, Sophie. Paul McCartney was born on June 18th, 1942, into a house filled with music. His father was a cotton salesman who played piano and trumpet in his own jazz band. Paul turned down music lessons and instead taught himself how to play the piano and guitar. Like John, Paul lost his mother when he was young. But John and Paul shared something else that would bring the two together, a love of music. Yeah. One summer day, Paul dropped by a festival to hear a band called the Quarrymen. Started by John, the Quarrymen played rock and roll music and jazzy tunes called skiffle. During the band's break, Paul played a few songs on the guitar. John liked what he heard and asked him to join the band. The Quarrymen had kids dancing all over Liverpool. When they needed a third guitarist, Paul suggested his friend George Harrison. Born on February 25th, 1943, George fell in love with rock and roll after hearing Elvis Presley play Heartbreak Hotel. When he got his first guitar, George practiced so much that his fingers were sore. Oh boy. Yeah. All that practice paid off. At the age of 15, George auditioned for the Quarrymen on the top of a double-decker bus. The band had found their new guitarist. Now all they needed was a new name. One of the hottest groups at the time was the Crickets. John thought it would be cool for their band to have a bug name too. Guitarist Stuart Sutcliffe suggested Beatles or Beatles. With their new name came a new goal. Yeah, the Beatles! The Beatles would become famous, or as they liked to say, they'd go to the toppermost of the poppermost. Isn't that funny, guys? Yeah, look at there, guys. The Beatles were still far from famous when they were invited to perform in Hamburg, Germany. John, Paul, George, Stuart, and drummer Pete Best jumped at the chance to bring their tunes overseas. The band played every day of the week, sometimes for as long as 8 hours. After months of rocking Hamburg, the Beatles left Germany with new mop-top haircuts, more fans in their first recorded single, My Bonnie. They also left without Stuart, who stayed in Hamburg to study art. Yep, there they go, guys. The Beatles were back in Liverpool and back to performing at small clubs. Fans stood wall to wall to hear them play. The band's popularity was growing. All they needed was a recording contract and a little help from a friend named Brian Epstein. And there's the Beatles' first close. As the Beatles' new manager, Brian got right to work. First, he changed the band's look. Instead of leather jackets and jeans, John, Paul, George, and Pete would perform in suits and ties. And the boys were expected to act like polite gentlemen and always be on time for their shows. John and Paul got to work too, teaming up to write new songs. Paul wrote his lyrics neatly in a notebook. John scribbled his songs on random scraps of paper. Their writing styles were different, but they led to catchy tunes such as She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand. Yeah, this is a groovy book, guys. Perfect for Global Beatles Day. The Beatles had great new songs, but still no recording contract. Finally, a music producer named George Martin invited John, Paul, George, and Pete to audition at his studio. After hearing them play Love Me Do, he offered the Beatles a contract and a suggestion: find a new drummer. Saying goodbye to Pete wasn't easy, but the Beatles would soon say hello to an awesome drummer from Liverpool who called himself Ringo Starr. That's right, Sophie. Your other buddy, Ringo Starr. and your very own Pepperland show that you have. Born Richard Starkey on July 7th, 1940, Ringo spent many months in the hospital as a young teenager. To pass the time, he started drumming, grabbing whatever he could to bang on his bedside cabinet. Years later, the drummer with many rings on his fingers had the right look and the right beat for the Beatles! Yay! By 1963, Beatlemania had spread throughout England. Kids combed their Beatles haircuts, carried Beatles lunchboxes to school, and read Beatles magazines. When fans thought they knew the band's favorite candy, they showered the stage with jelly beans while they sang. Along with the fame came a new nickname. John, Paul, George, and Ringo were called the Fab Four because they were so fabulous. Yeah, look at all this stuff, guys. Look at all this stuff. Isn't it awesome for Global Beatle Day, guys? The Beatles now sang at fancy London theaters and even performed for the royal family. See, look here, guys, the royal family at the time. What could be bigger than that? Brian had an idea. The Beatles would go to America. Yeah, look at that, guys. The first stop would be New York City to perform on a popular TV show. Then off to Washington, D.C. for the first Beatles concert in the USA. To Brian's surprise, the Beatles were more worried than excited. Their song, I Want to Hold Your Hand, was a hit in America. But would they be? Of course they would. On February 7th, 1964, the Beatles arrived at New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. The Fab Four didn't know what to expect until they were greeted by thousands of fans screaming their names and waving welcome signs. The Beatles had arrived in America, and so had Beatlemania! Woohoo! This was the year that my parents grew up, guys. That Sunday, 73 million Americans turned in to meet the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. In Washington, D.C., they played in an arena packed with fans. John, Paul, George, and Ringo had truly reached the toppermost of the poppermost, and it was just the beginning. And here's Sophie's favorite picture. The Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with the Yellow Submarine. For the next 6 years, the Beatles would give the world over 200 hit songs. They would be honored by their queen and star in 5 movies. The Beatles would become the best-selling band in music history. But through all the triumphs and fame, John, Paul, George, and Ringo would always be 4 friends from Liverpool who made their dreams come true. The end. And happy Global Beatles Day, guys. This was a great book I just bought at my local Books A Million.